The screaming started at 8:17 a.m. Not a movie scream, a real one. The kind that bounces off garage doors and makes dogs sit up because Paige Whitlock had just watched a tow hook kiss the bumper of her white Mercedes while half the cul-de-sac filmed, and 3 hours earlier that same woman took a crowbar to my brand new Camaro in the dark like a bored raccoon with a grudge. You know what I mean? That crunch of safety glass, the metallic scrape I still hear when the house gets too quiet. 40 grand of pride turned into red confetti on my driveway. What she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that while she was busy wrecking my car, I'd been busy wiring together the kind of proof that turns a neighborhood tyrant into a headline. Let me back up a sec. My name's Marcus Cole, electrician, 52, recently divorced and stubborn enough to bet the last of my settlement on a modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates. One of those places where every lawn looks factory fresh and everyone waves like they're auditioning for a brochure. I bought the house, then I bought the one selfish thing I'd wanted since I was a kid, a rally red 2024 Camaro that rumbled like bottled thunder. The first drive home, windows down, heat rolling off the Texas asphalt, felt like I'd finally outrun the worst year of my life. That feeling lasted 3 days. Enter Paige, perfect Bob, that never moved a smile that did math on people, in a white C class she treated like communion. She'd been HOA president for 6 years and wore the title the way other folks wear perfume loud. My welcome package wasn't cookies. It was a citation for the color of my mailbox. Black unacceptable. Brown only $89 for the privilege. Next came the lawn notices, 3/4 of an inch too tall, $25. Thanks, then oil spot fines, then an actual written warning for a garden hose stored without dignity. Yeah, that happened. The first board meeting I went to smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. Fluorescents hummed. Paige sat at a folding table like a judge enjoying sentencing day. Sports cars project an undesirable image, she said, looking at me like the problem was my existence, not the Camaro. She handed me a $200 fine and hinted at a lien. That night I read the covenants until 3 a.m., tracing rules with a highlighter and a bad attitude and surprise. The undesirable image clause didn't exist. I brought that up at the next meeting calmly with page numbers and sticky notes. Paige tilted back in her chair, gave me that tight smile and said, "Some people just don't understand rules exist for a reason. Marcus, maybe you'd be happier in a different neighborhood." The tone did the rest. I heard it, others heard it, the air heard it. A week later, I walked out to see a key line gouge from headlight to tail surgical slow mean. I called the police. Probably kids, the officer said, riding like he had dinner plans. The estimate was $2,800 I didn't have. And then my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, 73, lavender sweater eyes like hawks, asked me to come by. She shut her curtains and whispered, "I saw who did it, honey. Midnight. Tyler Page's boy." Something shiny in his hand. I asked if she'd testify. She couldn't. "She'll ruin me," she said, and told me about another neighbor who asked questions and suddenly had roof violations and a for sale sign. So I did what electricians do when someone tries to cut their power. I upgraded the whole system. I installed discrete 4K cameras and a dash cam with motion alert sight lines checked so they pointed only at my property. Legal documented, backed up to the cloud. The following Monday, a code officer named Brent, same last name as Paige's maiden one, because, of course, knocked, to investigate a privacy complaint. We walked the property, all legal. He left promising to monitor, which is city speak for "I'll be back when my cousin calls." Then the cameras paid off. 2:17 a.m. My phone buzzed. I expected raccoons. Instead, Paige herself, athleisure that cost more than my mortgage, and that gaudy ring crouched by my rear quarter panel, using a landscaping edger from the community shed, dragging steel through paint while wearing a smile I will never forget. Every part of me wanted to charge outside, but my divorce lawyer's voice document everything held me in place. I recorded and kept recording. The next afternoon, a certified letter tried to steal my car on paper unauthorized modifications, aftermarket exhaust remove, or be towed within 48 hours. The audacity had a scent. I was still holding that letter when my neighbor group text pinged. Mrs. Delaney had a friend I needed to meet, Gordon Ellis, the former HOA treasurer who'd moved away quietly after a storm of phantom violations. We met at a coffee shop that tasted like burnt beans and bad decisions. Gordon's hands shook as he slid a folder across the table. She didn't just bully people, he said she built a funnel. Fake invoices. A shell company, Evergreen Maintenance Partners, registered to Paige Mercer her maiden name with her home address. Money out every month to landscaping no one ever saw enough to make Mercedes payments look like a line item. He'd tried to report it and got buried. Inspections insurance mysteriously canceled the full pressure routine. I left with copies of everything. Here's where the twist turns the screws. My buddy Nate plays jazz on weekends and mentioned his brother Luis runs the towing company our HOA uses. Luis showed up at my kitchen table with a banker's box and a bulldog grin. 18 months of unpaid invoices, he said, dropping papers. All signed by Paige. Then he put down bank records showing checks going out to a sound-alike company called Summit Tow Solutions, registered to Paige's sister Rebecca. Real bills to a real tow operator paid on paper to a fake one with the real guy stiffed and my neighbors footing the tab. I was about to file liens, Luis said, eyes on fire. Tell me when. The when was 8:15 a.m., Paige's daily patrol, because we planned this like a military op. We looped in an attorney, Asha Patel, the kind of quiet-voiced shark who smiles when the numbers line up. She flipped through our evidence and said almost gently, "This isn't a squabble. This is mail fraud, insurance, fraud, embezzlement, RICO, if we're lucky." We prepped witness statements, mirrored hard drives, set backup cameras on porches. Texas is one-party consent. We were allowed to record our conversations, so we did. Asha pinged an investigative reporter, Kendall Ruiz, who loves HOA stories with villains and receipts. 8:30. Asha said, tapping her watch, she'll have an audience. At dawn, Luis parked his tow truck legally on our street. Paige noticed immediately, bathrobe cinched like armor, pacing on her driveway with her phone at her ear. Her board scurried over in whispery clumps. At 7:15, she marched out in a cream suit like she was about to fire someone. "Move your truck," she snapped. "This is private." Luis didn't even flinch. "Public street, ma'am. I'm here to collect $3,800 in unpaid invoices." He showed her the stack, then the second stack, the payments to Summit Tow Solutions. Color left her face in a clean wave. Officer Hale rolled up yesterday. He'd taken my vandalism report and listened as Luis laid out the paper trail. Paige tried tears, then outrage, then that oily political threat. Certain city officials have special arrangements, the kind that makes cops stop writing and start recording. Meanwhile, Mrs. Delaney walked over with a manila envelope like a librarian who'd had enough, and behind her came Gordon, Nate, and 3 other neighbors who'd collected their own scars from years of phantom violations. We spread documents across the tow truck hood like a buffet of consequences: bank statements, fake invoices, shell companies canceled insurance after anonymous safety reports. The board started cracking in real time. Cynthia, the secretary, squinted at a packet and said into Officer Hale's body cam, "I never saw any of this." Paige said the treasurer handled it. Tom, another board member, went pale and muttered, "We were told it was routine." Loyalty evaporates fast when federal prison gets mentioned out loud. And then the news van turned the corner. Kendall stepped out all business, and the first question out of her mouth was a sledgehammer. "Mrs. Whitlock, would you like to comment on documented allegations? You embezzled more than $75,000 while targeting residents who questioned you." Paige went fish-mouthed. I held up my phone. There she was at 2:17 a.m., carving my paint with a community tool that ring-catching the streetlight. A suburbs queen turned into a suspect by infrared pixels. You could feel the crowd's mood shift from fear to something close to glee. Dispatch Officer Hale said into his radio voice, steady requesting detectives and federal partners, possible mail fraud and embezzlement, multiple victims. That phrase, federal partners, broke something in Paige. She lunged for a microphone, climbed her porch step like a campaign stop, and started yelling about outside agitators. The neighborhood laughed, actual laughter ringing off vinyl siding, because once the spell breaks, it breaks. One voice called, "Tell us about Summit Tow Solutions," and another, "Where's the landscaping we paid for Paige?" Agent Morales arrived in an unmarked sedan with two others in suits. The crowd parted, and Mrs. Delaney, hands still trembling but voice strong, told the camera how her insurance was canceled after she asked for an audit. Gordon opened his briefcase and showed Kendall bank statements that matched checks to vendors the county had no record of. And I handed Agent Morales the memory card with Paige's midnight art project and watched his eyebrows climb. He nodded once. Asha's smile didn't change, but her eyes did. Luis had waited quiet, patient, professional. When the tow order printed in his hand, liens filed, authority granted, he looked at Paige the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. "Ma'am," he said, almost gentle, "for unpaid liens and fees totaling $4,200 with interest, this vehicle is being impounded." The hook rose, the strap tightened, and that Mercedes lifted slow, like the weight of 6 years of fear, leaving our street inch by inch. Paige made a sound I can't describe, half wail, half animal, while phones recorded and kids pressed their faces to bus windows like it was a parade. Agent Morales read the charges: mail fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, and the Miranda rights spread through the morning like church bells. Paige went down the porch steps in cuffs, past the car she'd worshipped and allegedly paid for with our fees. In my neighborhood, these people who'd been whispering on doorsteps for years cheered. Not mean, not cruel, just relieved. 6 months later, I'm on the same porch, coffee hot, air clean, listening to kids ride scooters without parents glancing over shoulders. Paige took a plea. 3 years. 5 probation restitution. They're still tallying. No home confinement, no country club, anything. The house sold at auction. Those funds renovated our cracked sidewalks and the sad little park she ignored. The new board live streams meetings, posts quarterly ledgers, and hired a real manager who believes receipts are not optional. Gordon's the treasurer, now unanimous vote, and Mrs. Delaney runs a Know Your Rights night on the first Thursday of every month that packs the community room like a concert. My Camaro, by the way, looks better than the day I bought it. Neighbors raised more than the repair bill in a week and insisted the extra go to a legal defense fund for the next community that calls. Because they call, they do emails from 2 counties over a message from a guy whose decorative rock became a $1,000 fine overnight. A single mom whose HOA misapplied payments until she was mysteriously in arrears. We bring what we learned, ask for the general ledger, verify vendors exist, record meetings, when you're allowed, watch the bank statements match the contracts, or don't. And we teach folks to push back before they're pushed out. People ask me if I miss keeping my head down, if all this was worth the sleepless nights and the knot in my chest that didn't go away until the handcuffs clicked. You know what? When I look up and see neighbors waving instead of pretending not to see each other, when I hear actual laughter on a street that used to sound like a library at exam time, I don't need to answer. The answer's in the air. The answer is in... So now it's your turn. Where do you land on this right versus wrong order versus control community versus the kind of power that hides behind bylaws? What counts as justice to you? Drop your take below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if your neighborhood's dealing with its own Paige and pearls. And if you've got a story, especially one that's still going, share it. We're building a network one cul-de-sac at a time, and the next tow hook, the next audit, the next round of applause might be on your block.